Hey, good evening, everyone. Wonderful world of an eclipse tonight. That light switch behind my head is driving me nuts. Yeah, we're having the full lunar eclipse on May 16th tonight. And I've been sitting, working through lots of stuff within me today. And I wanted to bring up the title of this post. It's like, essentially, we beat up ourselves our whole lives for doing things that happened in the past that we should have done better. We constantly live in this struggle of living up to our past expectations, etc. But the more and more I walk through and journey through this experience of awakening in 3D, I realize in a lot of ways we didn't have a chance. We preordained this stuff. We came wanting to learn certain lessons, and those things that we think are our low points or our poor mistakes or poor choices, the more and more you get underneath them, and the more and more you understand what epigenetic lineage is, what our parents program into us, what our religion programs into us, what our TV programs into us, and government, etc., you're going to find out that the hooks that allowed those things to happen were implanted in our minds in a lot of ways before we could even consciously choose. So a lot of boundary issues and other things that people are having came from lineage trauma. They existed in our mothers, in our fathers, in others before we even came here. And we decided to come into this family lineage to heal it, to have the experience of the lowest point of that, and then building the medicine within ourselves through our awareness, our understanding that we went through to get through this is the medicine that heals it. And to think that we could have had a better life, or we could have had a dream marriage, could have had a dream relationship, been rich, been all these things, the more and more you see under the veil, you're going to realize that a lot of this, the whole world has been programmed to not allow people to become rich, for people to love outside themselves first, and then they can't even have proper relationships, the attachment, the game of marriage and making a commitment to a person with our energy and not even realizing we're doing it. There's so much underneath the way 3D works that made it impossible to have those experiences. The more you see inside, the more you break down how you're loving outside yourself, and then you realize that you're not loving yourself first and trying to fill yourself with others, you start to realize that it's a losing battle right from the very beginning. And I just want people to know that there's no such thing as mistakes here. There's no such thing as making choices that cause massive trauma in your life. I'm going to tell you, in one way, shape, or form, it was predestined. It was designed to get you to deal with that situation. Grow out of the lack of boundaries. Grow out of the stuff that you were taught before a child, the wounds that were injected in you, the negative entities that are in some of our epigenetic lineage traumas are constantly trying to hook into us by keeping our vibration low. I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I did something wrong. I'm not worthy of. I'm not whatever. And every single person on this planet has some level of hook built into them before they're just after they're born. It's designed on purpose. So if you're beating yourself up, you think you've done wrong, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, all those kind of things, I was that. I guarantee I was that in a whole bunch of stuff. I shot myself down. I self-sabotaged. My relationships were spoiled. I attracted a lot of wounded people into my life. I couldn't have any different because that's all I knew. And to start to recognize that we're a result of all those things that has happened to us in our past, and of the programming that's in our parents, in our mothers, in our fathers, in our brothers and sisters, in our that government gives, that religion gives. These all predispose you to loving outside yourself, doing these things that shoot you in the foot. And then eventually you grow to the point where you think you're not worthy of, you're not good enough, and you shoot yourself in the foot before you even start. You get this negative self-talk going in your head, and you can't even be the slightest bit successful because you don't realize that you're worthy of success. And how could you be worthy of success if your mother or father or whatever had the same self-talk and they programmed it into you from the minute you were born? The news and the media is doing the same thing all the time. Religion gets us to tax ourselves to death and be good people and don't make sins and we're all sinners and all this kind of stuff. When you start understanding the meaning of the word sin, for example, sin is an archery term that says you're off target. My arrow is in sin of the target. So is sin then actually a bad thing? It's like, oh, I did a mistake and I'm a little off target and let's try again without being in sin of the target, with being on target. And then all of a sudden sin means something very different. If you're not harming people, like swearing, for example, are you harming people? You get this sin of, oh, I swore too much, or I committed adultery is one of the deepest, darkest ones, or I hurt someone or injured something. We've got it to the point now where we either admit these things and say we're bad and we're evil and we're going to go to hell unless we stop and change, or we start to become aware that humans make mistakes. This is part of the human process, is slipping up and swearing sometimes. And how many people, everybody's so worried about adultery and stuff, but everybody's trying out each other in college and doing it in between and feeling ashamed and guilty about it or whatever. Well, it's crazy, the stuff that they place around sexuality of our pleasure, etc., so that we can't even, if you don't explore and you don't understand what you want in your sexuality and other things, or you're shamed and guilted and you got to pick the first person that you're going to try it with and commit to them for the rest of your life, there's something really wrong there. And I grew up Catholic, and I've looked through all the shit. Sexual compatibility is not the first person that you meet. And if you got a bunch of shame and guilt about your pleasure and your body and all this kind of stuff, you're not even going to show up as the fullest version of yourself the first couple times you have that. And people are doing it and they're running around ashamed about it. Yes, there's some people that are good and this is what they do. Well, I married the first person I had sex with. It took me till 30 years old because I was so afraid of all this stuff. And it was okay, but I didn't find out until well after that there was trauma involved. And it mangled up the entirety of both of our sex lives afterwards. So is that something you're going to figure out on the first date and the first time you share intimacy with a person? Probably not. So we didn't make mistakes. To struggle is to say we made a mistake and then try and go back and fix it all the time or keep making up for it or whatever. You lose your self-worth, you lose all these things, and it just winds you up in a knot. So please, please, please just accept everything that's happened to you. Forgive yourself for it, because no matter what you did, you had to learn that lesson. And the sooner you can get out from under that guilt and shame and struggle of trying to fix it, or this is all I'm worthy of or whatever, the quicker you can be free. So I really, really, really believe that there was no choice but other than to have this struggle, because there was no teachings, there was no people, there was no awareness. A lot of this was programmed into our subconscious minds before we're even able to make decisions. And then we're beating ourselves for our whole entire life. This is the type of woman I'm attracting. This is whatever. Well, if your mother was wounded, she probably programmed what a safe woman is. I was talking to a lady today and she couldn't trust her mom. Her mom fed off her at the age of 8 and had no confidence. And her perspective of the divine feminine was mangled. And to see all women that way would make her predisposed towards men and not trust women and all this kind of stuff. These are happening all the time. I couldn't trust women because I didn't have a woman that felt safe from the beginning. My mother had trauma and she felt bad, and that's her choice. But how is my model of women aided by welcoming a mother in that has that? It's not her mistake. She did the best she could. She did just like me. But it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then it shows up in their children. And I know all about that because I had to unwind myself. And it's happening everywhere. There's very few people that don't have some level of trauma, aren't growing up with some kind of fear or self-worth issues or whatever, and that goes into your children. So just take this into your heart and realize you did nothing wrong. It's part of the human experience, and the quicker we can love ourselves, the quicker we can forgive all those things, the quicker we can start moving forward, because the veil is breaking. This is all being cleaned up, and we're letting it go. And the suffering and holding on to thinking we did something wrong or we're not worthy is actually making it even 10 times harder to move forward. So forgive, release. You did nothing wrong. You did the best you could with the knowledge that you knew at that time, and the version of you at that time. That's all you could have done. And that's it. Now this new you is more aware. It won't have those issues. It has better boundaries. It has all this stuff. And then the magic starts to happen, because you step into your full power and you become a new person right here and right now in every moment. So don't feel bad for the past. Free yourself and we'll move forward. I love you all. This is really important information. So if it doesn't make sense or there's any questions, send me a note and we'll get you through it. Love you all. Have a great evening. Thank you.